Welcome to Muskegon Rising, a community service project of the Muskegon Rotary Club. Our purpose is to create lasting positive change. We've been doing that here since 1916. So, let's get started.
Good morning. I'm Rem Sprague, Rotarian, and with a fellow Rotarian this morning, DJ Hilson, the Muskegon County Prosecutor. Good morning, DJ.
Good morning, Rem.
I want to talk this morning about some activities that are happening around the issue of gun violence. You know, the sort of traditional, at least conservative approach to gun violence is we need more police, we need more judges, we need to put people away and punish them, and really kind of ignores the root causes of gun violence. You've taken a different approach, and I understand there's a new grant that you're going to be working with. Can you tell me a little bit about that and talk in general about your approach to violence in the community?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me today. This is a different setting for me. I'm on the other side of the microphone, and it's really an honor to talk about this issue. It's an issue that gun violence has always been sort of an underlying issue in Muskegon County. It was true when I first started in the prosecutor's office in 1999, and it stays true today. Although I'd like to think that we are making better strides in how we prevent it. As you said in your introduction, part of what I'm used to and what law enforcement is used to is reacting. That seems to be the nature of our job, that something happens and we react. Law enforcement shows up, they investigate. We react by taking that information and turning it into a charging decision if the evidence is there to support it. And I think what I started to learn early on in my elected career, and even so much in my later years as an assistant prosecutor, is that the prosecutor's office in general can be also part of proactive solutions. And being proactive in some of these arenas is, I don't know if it's novel or not, but certainly I think it's a little novel here in Muskegon County in the sense that when we talk about gun violence, people want to feel safe, they want to feel secure, they want their neighborhoods to be quiet, and they want those folks that are causing these issues to be locked up, and certainly that's part of the equation. But what if we were able to do something well before an individual decided that this was the only way that they could solve whatever conflict it was, that I need to grab a gun, I need to fire that gun because that's going to resolve whatever issue I have with whomever. What if we were able to put a stopgap in there before that decision was actually made? And that's where Safer Teens sort of came into the forefront. And what's interesting is that that program, I had no idea that program existed. I had no clue.
How did it come to you?
In the most strangest of ways. This was, if I remember correctly, this was sort of either on the cusp or the tail end of COVID. We were still doing a lot of Zoom meetings, and I've been a participant in the Muskegon County Social Justice Commission, and it just so happened that Dr. Brian Stork was invited, and he had brought along with him a couple of residents, one of whom who had actually done a research project on gun violence, gun-related injuries that were coming into the ER, and decided that as part of, I'm assuming it was a school project or something to do with his schooling, decided that he was going to track some data and see, the age range, the gender, the race, the age range, and the location where these folks were coming from, getting treated for gunshot wounds. And I think he had about 4 or 5 years worth of data. And ultimately, he was able to determine that a lot of the folks that were coming into our local ER with gunshot injuries were African-American males, right around the ages of 18 to 25, coming from, the urban areas of Muskegon and certainly Muskegon Heights. That was where a large percentage of these gunshot injuries were coming from. And that sparked a conversation amongst those of us on that particular meeting that day about, what could we do as a group to help try and stop some of this. And at the time, and still today, there's a group called GUNS. It's Gaining Unity Through Nonviolent Solutions. Dr. Pamela Smith as one of the chairs. Janet Robinson is the other. She works for the Michigan State Police, and they are grassrooting, especially with our young people, having conversations and sparking, that dialogue as to how we can, as a community, sort of look at this. And on top of that, Dr. Stork, then we ultimately formed a little subcommittee, which I volunteered to chair, because, again, this is an area that is of great interest to me as it relates to gun violence. And through Dr. Stork's connections with the University of Michigan, we end up in a meeting with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Carter, who is part of the Gun Institute. And I always get this name. I totally screwed this name up. But there's an actual arm of the University of Michigan, the medical school, that deals with gun violence. Okay. And they are funded by the CDC. And they, as it just so happened, they were in the process of re-upping their grant with the CDC and offered us an opportunity to pilot Safer Teens here in Muskegon County. And it was an evidence-based program already. It had gone through some of that scrutiny and had been pretty successful in the Flint area, which obviously also is sort of a high violent gun violence area. And so we decided to jump on board with this, and the idea was that this Safer Teens program was going to be funneled through the emergency room. And ultimately, how it works is when an individual comes in, it doesn't necessarily have to come in for a gun injury, but if a person comes in that age range, which was 18 to 24, even a little bit younger. They were given 3 screening questions, and the 3 screening questions dealt with, have you ever witnessed violence? Have you actually been violent? And so those 3 questions were geared towards determining that person's exposure to violent behavior. And depending on the answers to those questions, the intervention would trigger. So if you triggered by your responses a propensity or a risk for violent behavior, then there's an intervention that happens almost immediately. And it's essentially a person coming in and talking about various resources and ways of conflict resolution and whatnot. And the idea was that it would spark conversation between the person who had taken the questionnaire and the interventionist, and hopefully lead to some strategies on how to deal with conflict in a nonviolent way. It seemed very simplistic, and ultimately they were able to see some positive results in Flint. And so because of those relationships and Dr. Stork's really passion in this area, and I'd never met him before, and now having been around him for a few years, he has got a passion for this, and so we started to pilot this program, and it was all kind of run through the hospital. In fact, I just last week met the community health worker that actually was hired and assigned to not only do the assessment tool itself when folks come into the emergency room, but also then be part of the intervention strategy as well. And she has a background. Her nephew, if I remember correctly, her nephew was killed here in Muskegon at a young age through gun violence. And so she has some direct history and knowledge on the subject and is very passionate about it, and has a lot of energy in looking towards these solutions. And so ultimately, that's where this whole thing was born.
So let me get this straight. A urologist, Dr. Stork is a urologist,
yes,
comes to you with the idea about gun violence needing to be addressed. So as the chief medical officer at the hospital some years ago, we had a monthly meeting with physician leaders, and Jim Rice, a general surgeon who dealt with trauma, raised his hand and said, look, there's an issue in this community with gun violence, and we're not doing anything about it. What can we do as the medical profession? And my response was, I really don't know. It's not in our lane. Our lane is to treat the consequences, not necessarily, we don't have the capacity ourselves to go upstream. Well, Brian didn't stop there, and he realized the physicians and the hospital can't fix gun violence,
right,
but we can raise the issue. We see the consequences, and so we can raise the issue. And fortunately, he reached out to the right person.
Yeah, I tell you, it wasn't surprising to me, but it was very refreshing. This idea that here is, at the time, Mercy, I think it was before the Trinity name change, but Mercy Health, in a physician saying, I want to be part of the solution, and I think we can be, and here's how we can be. And it was really him opening those doors that ultimately led to this grant that we're here to talk about, because it was Dr. Stork who emailed me and said, hey, I just saw this federal grant that's being sort of fostered by the Michigan State Police, and I've read it, and Safer Teens would fit perfectly within the parameters of what they want to deal with. What do you think? and from my standpoint, I'm a big idea guy. I don't worry about the details so much. And I said, well, look, I'm certainly willing to listen and to look into this. And he said, well, that's great, but we have 2 weeks. It was one of the, it was, and this is just this past late spring, right? And so we literally have 2 weeks to put a team together, write a grant, and submit it. And again, I can't thank at Trinity Health enough, because I reached out to those folks that I have relationships with through the Health Project. At the time, Stevie Reel, Laura Fitzpatrick, and I said, look, apparently this grant, the way it's set up, it needs a government agency as a fiduciary. And I'm happy to be that agency for you. I said, I don't have the resources in order to, help with the grant management, but I can be the named fiduciary. And they're like, don't worry. We had a quick meeting. It was decided that Laura was going to write the grant. The Health Project was going to kind of back us up on this, and that we were going to formulate a strategy and a plan as to how we were going to implement Safer Teens in a broader fashion. Because we'd seen some success it running through the ER. But again, as you can well imagine, that's a small segment of a larger population that we needed to reach.
Right. Only a small percentage of the population comes to the emergency room.
Right.
A large percentage of the population exists in schools.
Yes.
Sort of a captive audience.
Yes.
As long as they attend school.
Yes.
Which is another question we'll get to.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So ultimately, we strategized, and it was sort of my thought that we could wrap truancy into this mix, because truancy, for me, has been a cornerstone of my administration since I ran in 2012. That's a big deal for me. If kids are in school, they are opening the doors to their opportunities for future opportunities, and they are off the streets. They're not causing problems, right? They're not causing trouble. They're actually engaged in learning, and so I'm a big believer in that. And have worked really hard with the schools, partnership with the schools, with the ISD in my office, to enforce the laws of the state of Michigan as it relates to kids being in school. And ultimately, I believe that population, that group of students that are starting to make those decisions about not going to school, are showing those signs, that risk sign that is ripe for this sort of intervention strategy.
Yeah, you're connecting the dots in a way that a lot of prosecutors wouldn't necessarily think about.
Right. So ultimately, we devised. So this is probably the best part. We devised this plan, and the grant is written to incorporate truancy as being sort of the truant kids being our at-risk population that we're going to do this intervention strategy with. And we made that decision without the schools being present. And so,
okay.
Because again, we are moving at the speed of light here in order to get this grant in on time. And the way that I viewed the world is, I sort of took a risk, and the risk was that I knew that I had strong relationships with all our schools, that this would be something that they wouldn't necessarily balk at, because again, all we were asking of them is an opportunity to have some space in order to provide, it sort of admit this assessment tool and then a space for intervention if necessary. And that was it. That's all we needed from them. And of course, their cooperation and buy-in. And ultimately, we submit the grant on time, and the award comes out. And through the tea leaves and the grapevine, we learned that our grant was the best of those submitted.
Wow,
which is awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, again, people don't. I mean, if you're listening to this or watching this, you don't understand how quickly this came together. Because it's more than just writing a narrative. It's a budget. It's
Right.
figuring out what we're going to do, and the strategy is that we were going to use this grant, these grant dollars to hire community health workers. And community health workers, as you know, are folks from the community.
Right. They're not licensed
Right.
caregivers. They have a real connection with the community, a trusted relationship with the community, and they're open to interacting with the medical community.
Yeah.
So they see people in the grocery store putting candy in their basket. They know they have diabetes.
Yeah.
One of them in particular, who will be nameless, reaches in, takes the candy out of the basket, scolds the individual, and gets away with it because they're a trusted, friendly person in the community.
Right.
And so they're an important liaison between lay people in the community and the medical scientists in the medical community.
Yeah, it's a fascinating relationship.
Yeah.
It really is, because you're getting folks that are passionate about the particular topic. In this particular case, it's trying to prevent gun violence in the neighborhoods where they're living or walking through, and that to me is huge. And so the idea is now we're expanding Safer Teens into the school system. The idea is that the grant dollars would be used to help fund 3 community health workers, and actually 4 community health workers. And the decision was made that we would target the 3 school districts that are struggling the most with their truancy numbers: Muskegon Heights, and Orchard View. And that the community health workers would be essentially embedded into those schools. And ultimately, with the help of the ISD, who over the last few years now has a truancy coordinator, identifying those individuals that are starting to show signs of chronic truancy, I'll get there, chronic truancy, and ultimately then the assessment tool is given, and if necessary, then the intervention begins. And to me, truancy has always been sort of a symptom to a deeper root cause,
Right.
Whether it's at school, whether it's at the family, whatever, it's a symptom. And now being able to assess whether or not there's a tendency for violence is even a greater tool for us, because now we don't have to wait for that young person to be struggling at home for whatever reason, seek the streets and the gangs of the streets as sort of that stopgap in their mind to the emotional support that they need, ultimately leading to them making really bad decisions as it relates to gun violence. The idea is that we can intervene before those decisions are made and provide resources to help sort of solve the problem, whatever that underlying cause is, and ultimately sparing not only that person's life, but whatever life that they were going to take as a result of some conflict they had no understanding of.
Yeah, so here we have another federal grant coming to little old Muskegon County. Access Health has a National Institutes of Health grant for over several years, several $1 million, investing in our little county. And when I read the grant proposal, I realized this is not the only effort, a collaborative effort to address teen health, teen violence, and we have sort of a foundation of collaboration, of people stepping outside their traditional lane to work with others. You're a great example of that. The fact that you took Brian's message and you immediately responded in a positive way, which is frankly unique in my understanding of prosecutorial responsibility and authority. And you're not unique in the community in that regard. People are stepping out of their lane all the time, reaching out to each other. Talk a little bit about this culture in Muskegon. I moved here in 1981. I didn't have a sense of it then, but I certainly have an appreciation for it now.
Yeah, I tell you what, it is probably one of the biggest assets that Muskegon County has that a lot of people don't recognize. Maybe they'll see the fruits of the labor, but they don't recognize the sort of the engine that's driving that. It's hard to explain because I'm so used to this idea that you get an idea or there's an issue or a problem that needs to be solved, and you can be part of that solution, but you need some other stakeholders in order to make it happen. And it's phone calls. It's the relationships that you built, whether it be through Rotary or other boards or whatever that you're on. And all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I remember that person does that, and I can reach out to them and see if they are interested. And next thing you know, you're sitting around the table with people that have the same vision and goal of solving this issue, and are bringing their own set of relationships and resources to the table in order to accomplish that. And I have yet to be in any situation where that has been sort of the model. And in here in Muskegon County, have somebody say, "No, we're not going to do that."
Oh, yeah.
It's just amazing to me. And that's true for the law enforcement community. We have such a great relationship with all our law enforcement partners. And it's been true in the community at large. This being a prime example. I mean, I would never have met Dr. Brian Stork. Never.
Fortunately, you hope.
Well, yeah. I mean, ultimately, as I get older, you never know. But I never would have met him in a non-professional setting outside of this, and it was just sort of the circumstances and the willingness to go, you know what? Let's do it. Let's give it a try. I mean, at the end of the day, this will be sort of cliche, but I love Wayne Gretzky's analysis. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm all about figuring out ways that we can be smarter in our how we handle crime in this community. And part of that is being preventative, proactive. And the more that I can be proactive, and that's why I will gravitate to those organizations and to those groups that are looking for proactive solutions, because I want to be part of that. I can use the title, if you will, or the resources that my office has in order to be part of a proactive solution. Because at the end of the day, what that does is that it lightens the load that my folks have to worry about. It lightens the load that law enforcement has to worry about. So why wouldn't I be part of that?
Great. Well, I think you've said it all, DJ. Any final comments about this grant or the community in general?
I'm really excited about this grant itself. We're in the early stages of it. And, we're in the process of having the application process open for community health workers. So if you know somebody in the community that is got this passion for finding solutions to gun violence or having quiet neighborhoods in their community, please go to the Trinity website, go to the job page, wherever that is, and look for community health workers specifically related to this grant and this work. Because we need you. We need you. And, this is going to be something very novel. And ultimately, again, it's going to, in my opinion, if I look into the future, it's going to show that Muskegon County is working towards being at the forefront of these issues and finding solutions in order to curb it. And I'm fairly confident that over the next few years, as we start to really implement this strategy, we are going to be able to see the fruits of that. And I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited about this idea that we can not only curb young people from making these violent decisions, but ultimately turn them into success stories.
Great.
Point them in the right direction.
Well, thanks, DJ. It's been a great conversation. I really appreciate what you bring to this community. And I wish you the very best with this grant.
Thank you.